Jai Jagannath, Radhe Radhe. Thank you for participating in this meeting. We are still talking about the perception of God in the various ancient cultures. So I think that we discussed in previous meetings, we discussed about the natural religion of Mother Earth, Mother Nature, Mother Earth. Then we briefly discussed about the various ancient religions in the Mediterranean. But the most important part, the real turning point in the history of religions and in general in the history of mankind is the Zoroastrian revolution, because the religions in the Mediterranean, in the Middle East, are actually offshoots of the religion of Zarathustra, Zoroaster, Zarathustra, whatever you want to call it. So, I have written one answer on Quora about this topic. As you know, I am writing on Quora quite often. The question was, did Zoroastrianism originate from Vedic Hinduism? So we can comfortably conclude that until the Zoroastrian revolution, all the ancient cultures, all the ancient religions were basically development of the Sanatana Dharma. Sanatana Dharma is the eternal, Sanatana means eternal, natural, universal understanding, knowledge that makes human beings human beings. So there are basic principles that all healthy, mentally healthy human beings naturally follow, which are: number one, truthfulness, honesty; number two, compassion. Compassion means love, harmony, cooperation, having the feeling of being united, being together, being parts of the same supreme existence. So that naturally brings compassion, kindness. Then number three, cleanliness or purity. The idea of purification is universally natural for human beings, and it's also very useful because purification is basically also hygiene. So by observing purity, we can get good health both physically and mentally. And then number four is self-control, self-discipline, which means making an effort to improve. In Sanskrit, these four basic principles are called Satyam, Dayam, Socham, Tapas. These four principles are described as the four legs of Dharma. We see in the Bhagavata Purana, for example, when Maharaj Parikshit finds the Kali Purusha, the personification of the Kali Yuga, he sees that this Kali Purusha is attacking the last leg of Dharma. 3 legs have already been broken. So tapas, Socham, and Dayam have already been broken. The only one that is still remaining that is in great danger is Satyam. This is why Satyam is considered the most important principle of Dharma, because it's the most basic, most fundamental. If someone is not sincere, honest, there can be no Dharma, there can be no religion, no spirituality, no human life. Oh, by the way, anytime you want to ask questions or elaborate on what we are discussing, please stop me, as usual.
Yeah. Sure, sure.
Okay, thanks. You can also keep your microphone open because it's not a problem if some noise are coming. It's okay.
Okay,
So,
fine.
what happened? Zoroastrianism originated from Vedic Hinduism, specifically from the fallen Kshatriyas who left the Arya Varnashram system and chose to worship Asuras instead of Devas. This was the big turning point. So, until then, some people had been worshipping Asuras but not presenting them as God. So, people have always worshipped ghosts and Asuras and Nagas and, you know, powerful entities. But until Zoroaster, they never tried to pass them as God. They were passing them as powerful entities, as lords, but never as God. Anyway, in the earliest text, the Gathas, Zarathustra states 19 times that the Deva, 19 times, not just once, that the Deva are actually deities, but they are the wrong gods. That must be rejected. See Yasna 32.3 and 41.6, where it is said that they were worshipped by the Iranian people. So, before Zarathustra, everybody worshipped the Devas. But Zarathustra said, no, we should not worship the Devas because Devas are the wrong gods. We don't worship the Adityas, we should worship the Daityas. A curious episode is about a famous Hindu Brahmana whose name is reported as Chandra Gacha or something. That obviously doesn't sound like a Sanskrit name, but it's from the Parsi tradition. This Hindu Brahmana arrived at the court of Ishtaspa for a philosophical debate with Zarathustra, but ended up converting to the Zarathustra religion. The most interesting point is that according to some Indologists, Vedic civilization from which Hinduism descended would simply be a later deformation of the original religion and culture established by Zarathustra. We should therefore ask why a Brahman coming from India, contemporary Zarathustra, was trying to establish the superiority of Vedic philosophy, if that had not been existing already for a very long time. According to the Parsi hagiography, this Brahmana was the guru of Jamaspa, a minister of King Vishtaspa, and had arrived at court with the following of many disciples. Mainstream academia. You say something?
No, no.
Okay. Mainstream academia, that developed from a very strong Abrahamic bias, spread wrong information to confuse a clear vision of the story, to give more credence to Zoroastrianism, that they recognize as their own religion. This means that the colonial Indologists, who were basically Christian, they recognized the Parsism, Zendavesta, as the origin of their own religion, their own Christian religion. In any case, mainstream academics still consider the Zend-Avesta as one of the most ancient religious texts, contemporary, if not precedent, to the compilation of the Vedas, and equally connected to the peoples labeled as Indo-Europeans or Proto-Indo-Europeans. I don't remember if I wrote it here, but the famous Max Muller, who wrote the Encyclopedia of the Sacred Books of the East, gave prominence to the Zend-Avesta, considering it much more important than all the Vedic literature. Anyway, unfortunately, the biased presentations based on the notorious Aryan invasion theory and its corollaries have been absorbed not just by academics, but also by the public and by amateurs, and especially by the various esoteristic researchers and practitioners that have built their own speculations over the old false theories. This includes the German Nazi movement, not just the colonial movement, but the Nazi movement. You have probably heard that they speak of Aryan race. So, Zoroaster used the term Aryan to refer to his own followers, to himself and his own followers. While the term was previously used to indicate the people who followed the Vedic way of life, Zarathustra turned it upside down, just like he called the Devas devils, which means demoniac spirits. And he called his own god Ahura Mazda. Now, Ahura Mazda is so clearly coming from the word Asura, Asura Maha. So much that the place where Zarathustra went to preach and made a lot of followers in Mesopotamia, developed the Assyrian culture. The Assyrian culture takes its name from the name of their god, Ashur, from which Assyria and today Syria, the nation with the capital near Jordan. Syria is a nation still now in the Middle East. We find that Zoroastrianism is a direct ancestor of Abrahamic faith. It's the direct ancestor of the revolution that started with Ashur, then started the idea of imperialism, conquest, battles, war. Then from the Assyrian Empire developed the Persian Empire. The Persian Empire also is based on the Zoroastrian religion. Now, the Persian Empire was defeated by the Greek Empire of Alexander the Great. After the empire of Alexander the Great, we have the development of the Roman Empire. So, but the beginning of the imperialistic mentality of conquering through war and killing lots of people and developing slavery is actually starting from Zoroaster. So, in Parsism, the general idea of religion becomes drastically separated from the concept of Dharma and Vidya, which means natural ethical principles and transcendental knowledge, that characterize the Indo-Vedic tradition. In the Zend-Avesta and in Parsism, we find the earliest form of imperialist religion that must be enforced by the government, based on political loyalty and not on the development of human potential in harmony with all beings. In other words, it enforces a strict moral and social discrimination between the faithful and the infidels, where the infidels are unfaithful are those who have not accepted to convert, have no civil rights, and are legitimately subjugated, robbed, and enslaved because they are intrinsically enemies and bad people by definition. It is precisely this perspective that has attracted the colonial Abrahamic Indologists to grow a great interest and respect for the Zend-Avesta. Abraham Hyacinthe Anquetil Duperron, the first academic to specifically study Indian culture in the middle 1700s, began to work with the French translation of the Zend-Avesta, and only later, in 1804, produced a Latin translation of the Upanishads. Friedrich Max Müller dedicated to the Zend-Avesta several volumes of his large work, The Sacred Books of the East, a collection of translations by various scholars in the field, including clergyman Lawrence Mills, professor of philology is a science of languages, of the Zend, philology of the Zend, at Oxford in 1897. Some of Mill's speeches have been published under the title of Our Own Religion in Ancient Persia, or being lectures delivered in Oxford presenting the Zend-Avesta as collated with the pre-Christian exilic Pharisaism of the Jews, advancing the Persian question to the foremost position in our biblical research. So, not just me who says like that, who thinks like that. A corollary of this academic tendency has political and social aspects in India, as the small Parsi community that anciently took shelter in the region, more precisely at Bombay, present Mumbai, obtained special favors from the British colonial government, so much that it became the major financial power in the subcontinent. Still today, Mumbai, that in colonial times was known as the Gate of India, constitutes the financial capital of India and the center of Asuric propaganda, whose primary pillar is the cinema industry of Bollywood, controlled for many decades by the mafia of Dawood Ibrahim. Our contemporary Parsi religious community that took shelter in India in the previous centuries, and more recently in other regions of the world, strongly believe in a much earlier date, such as 6,500 before the current era, means 8,500 years ago, as declared by Dr. Ervad Karkanawala, whatever it is, this is a Parsi name, of Bombay, or even 6,900 BCE, according to the magazine Mazdazna, September 1957, Los Angeles, California, USA, or even 7,551 BCE, according to some astrological calculations. The authors of classical Greece, Aristotle, Hermodoros, Dinon, Euxodus, Hermippus, Xanthus of Lydia, blah blah, quoted by Plinius the Elder, who is a big Latin Roman historian, believed that Zarathustra had lived at least 6,000 years before Plato, who was considered the reincarnation of Zarathustra himself. The problem of the time frame of ancient civilizations is due to the fact that Western academia, born as an instrument of Abrahamic propaganda, was based on the idea that the first and only creation of the world had happened at 9 in the morning of 23rd October 4004 BCE, before the current era, and the Great Flood exactly in 2349 before the current era. These dates were calculated by Archbishop Usher, who died in 1656. Even after the biblical version was discarded because of the discovery of geological fossils and the growing popularity of the Darwinian evolution theory, global academic institutions have preserved the idea that until a few thousand years before Christ, the entire mankind lived in a very primitive state. Still today, the global calendar points the 0 year rather arbitrarily to the time of the birth of Jesus, although historical verification has shown that it is not an accurate date. And a great number of scholars in the English-speaking worlds, including India, still use the acronym AD, which means Anno Domini, in the year of our Lord, to designate the years of the current Christian era. It is therefore from the perspective of Abrahamic calculations, more or less narrow-minded, that conventional academics have fixed the dates of birth of Buddha and subsequently of Adi Shankara, respectively, around 500 BCE and 800 CE. Similarly, the Aryan invasion theory puts the introduction of Sanskrit and the Rig Veda in the Indian subcontinent around 1500 BCE, after which, in the subsequent centuries, a sort of religious evolution would have produced the other Samhita, Sama, Yajur, Atharva, a job that, according to expert scholars, had required up to about 800 BCE. Then followed the Brahmanas between 900 and 600 BCE, blah blah blah, the Aranyakas, Upanishads, finally Mahabharata, Ramayana, Puranas, and Vedanta. So, actually, these are completely arbitrary dates, based on the style of the composition and the preservation conditions of the most ancient manuscripts found, which is a rather questionable criteria, if we consider that literary styles largely depend on the individual writer, and are not necessarily homogeneous in each historical period. Also because the style differences in Sanskrit words are minimal, and mainly consist in difference in subjects. In other words, the bigoted archaeology, the more complex and perfect artifacts are assigned to a period of highest splendor, while the simpler and rougher items must necessarily belong to a primitive or decadent period. In other words, the Upanishad must necessarily be more recent because they contain complex and abstract philosophical elaborations, something that the compilers of the Vedic Suttas could not have been able to do because they were still a bit stupid and underdeveloped. Obviously, for the academics that are officially recognized as authorities in the field, there is no relevance to the fact that Vedic scriptures themselves state that they have been compiled all together simultaneously within a period defined by precise astronomical references around 3000 BCE, and based on a tradition transmitted orally for thousands of years more. According to the Vedic tradition, the passage from oral to written is also considered a sign of decadence and not of progress, because it indicates a decrease in the memory capacity of human beings. Official academics do not even give credence to the documents of the Tibetan tradition, according to which the historical Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, had lived over a millennium before 539 544 BCE, precisely around 1800 BCE. The historical reference recorded by Buddhist sources indicate the year 1807 BCE for the attainment of enlightenment by the Buddha. Okay, on on such basis, we should push back the date of the appearance of Adi Shankara, whose declared mission was to repair the damage caused by the degradation of the original Buddhism. This historical mark seems to trace back, according to the documents of his religious lineage, the Sankaracharya Matas, to 509 BCE. In regard to the dating of the text on the basis of the most ancient available manuscripts, it is interesting to note that still today nobody has ever tried to apply the same criteria to the biblical scriptures. Both Vedic and biblical scriptures contain references to previous and more ancient compilations, but because the Vedic texts and those of other cultures, such as the Egyptians and the Sumerian, speak of two ancient dates, such references are labeled as unreliable or incredible. So this answer of mine has had 16,000 views. So in general, people were very happy with it. Now we have a lot of other references to the change, to the revolution, the complete turning upside down of the Zarathustra revolution. Now, I don't know if you have seen my book Gods or Aliens, which is also on PDF on my website, in which there is an entire chapter on Zarathustra. So the story of Zarathustra is quite interesting. Another important thing is that let me get the book. Unfortunately, now I cannot share the text, because this software doesn't allow it. I should close it and open again, but not happening. So I'm going to get the book. Let me see. I have this one in Italian. Let me see if I can find the one in English, if it's not too difficult. No, I don't have it. Okay, no problem. Simultaneous translation. So basically, we have 1 to 5, page 1 to 5. The previous chapter, before the chapter on Zarathustra, my books describes the Sakas, the Ashkenazi, the Khazaria, and the Kasa or Saka. So you probably have heard about the name Saka, because in India there is a Saka calendar, the Saka era, which marks a period when some of these tribes from the Caucasus came down to India around, I think, the first century of the current era, which has nothing to do with the Aryan invasion theory. There have been waves of migrations into India, but none of them brought the Sanskrit and the Vedic civilization. So we see Ahura Mazda is very similar to the Yahweh of the Bible. We have a lot of so-called angels and saints and saviors. So it's we can find the same also in the Jewish, the Judeo-Christian and Muslim mythologies. So Ahura Mazda, the Parsi theologians explain the name Ahura Mazda on the basis of Ahu, which is translated as I am, which is the same theological explanation of the name of Yahweh in the Jewish tradition. For Zoroaster, the concept of sin consists in the lack of faith towards the only one God, Ahura Mazda, in disobedience to the order of the priests and the political authorities, government. And in heresy, that is the sin of heresy, which means dare to believe in something else. The Parsi religion is very rigidly patriarchal, has a very similar story of creation that ends in a final judgment, the end of days, which in Parsi is called Roshan Rosh, and the threat of eternal hell. We can also find the snake and the name of Satan as symbols of evil, the need for a savior, Soshant, especially mentioned in Yasna 19, verse 88. The concept of the supreme prophet, the spite for material nature, that is called putrid, like decomposing, dirty, polluting. And the various doctrines that derive from that, specifically the Mandaism, the Yazidism, and the early Christianity, specifically the Gnostic Christianity and Judaism and Christianity. The idea of the souls is complicated by the idea of a splitting of each individual soul that needs to become whole again by reassembling all the parts before becoming perfect. So the minerals are integrated into vegetables from the earth and the fertilizers. The vegetables are integrated into animals like feed, like the food given to animals. And the animals, especially goats and sheep, are integrated by human beings when the Parsis eat meat. Then the feminine part must be integrated through marriage, means the man is the only real soul, and the female women are just a part of the original soul that must be integrated. So we have, the various situations that are very similar to the Abrahamic religions. They say that Parsism gives a lot of importance to the external paraphernalia of the priests, particularly the dressing, the talismans, the amulets, all these, especially the astrological influences. The cosmology proposed by Zarathustra is even more complicated than the Vedic one, and the Parsis were originally called Chaldeans when they were in the Mesopotamia. They're called Chaldeans, and the priests of the Parsis were called the Magi. And they were very famous for their astrological knowledge. So they built the kind of pyramid called ziggurat that they also used as observatories to watch the skies and the movement of the planets and everything. From the social point of view, the original followers of Zoroaster were divided into clans based on birth prejudice that do not correspond to the Vedic Varnas. At the top of the clan, the Parsi clans, we have the kings, the Kshatriyas, and the princes that are the topmost authority, and they are qualified by birth. They are then there are the priests, which are also qualified by birth, the Magi, that are like the Jewish Levites, but they have also the functions of preachers and judges, magistrates, like in Islam. Then, apart these two social divisions, there are the ordinary people, the commoners, which are similar to the thrall in the Celtic or Teutonic cultures, and then the slaves. That slaves do not have any rights and are like cattle. There's no difference. Then, of course, the Varna system is very different. Then from the cult of Ahura Mazda developed the cult of Mitra. Mitra is the god of revenge, and sometimes described as a alter ego of Ahura Mazda. It's double, it's a kind of other aspect of Ahura Mazda. So Mitra became Mithraism became the main religion of the Roman army. The Roman army met the Parsis. They liked the idea of Mitra as a revenge god that goes around and kills everyone. So they made it their own religion. So that was the baptism of the Mitraist religion was a kind of mock purification by bathing in the blood of a bull that was slaughtered for that reason. So we can see that it's not exactly sattvic. And this Mitra has absolutely nothing to do with the Mitra in the Adityas. Is not the same person. Absolutely not. Lots of people make confusion about that, but you know what to do. They're ignorant. So this shower of cattle blood was called taurobolia. So that's that's quite disgusting. But if you can see, you make a comparison. I don't know if you heard about the construction of the third temple in Jerusalem that is being planned for this period.
No, I have not heard.
No, okay. So the third temple, because the first temple was built by Solomon. According to the Jewish tradition, the first temple in Jerusalem was built by King Solomon, which according to history never existed, but it's okay, and was destroyed by the Assyrian, specifically by a king called Nabucodonosor. Then the second temple was built by Herod the First, which lived about 600 BCE, and was taken over by the Greeks of the Seleucid Empire that took over the area of Palestine after after Alexander the Great conquered the territory. When Alexander died, he left his empire to two of his closest friends and generals. One was Ptolemy and the other was Seleucus. Ptolemy got all the eastern part, which means Egypt, Iran, and so on. And Seleucus got the western part, which included Syria, Iraq, and Palestine, and everything. So about 400 years before the current era, the emperor, the Seleucid emperor took over the temple, the second temple, and tried to install some images of the Greek gods, and then led to the rebellion of the Maccabees. The rebellion of the Maccabees is the great turning point for the development of the Jewish religion, because the Maccabees took over the second temple and they reconsecrated the second temple, removing all the things that were inside the temple, throwing out everything. And in the process, they miraculously found some very old manuscripts that they said had been written by Moses. And that's how they started to write the Old Testament of the Bible. And anyway, the second temple was destroyed by the Romans in 70 something of the current era, because the They wanted to stop the rebellion that the Jews were trying to still do against the Romans after the Seleucids. So basically, the second temple was completely destroyed. Before being completely destroyed, the Temple of Jerusalem, the second temple, was characterized by animal sacrifices. And sometimes in festivals, there would be more than 1 million animals per day killed in the temple. So it is described by Josephus in Hebrew antiquities, Jewish antiquities, that the priests inside the temple of Jerusalem had the blood up to their knees. So the entire temple was flooded with blood up to the knees. Because, according to the books of the Old Testament, the Jews had to offer a lot of blood sacrifices. So at some point, the situation got out of hand, and as I said, the second temple was destroyed, and the Jews went up and down here and there, whatever. They call it the diaspora. Now, after the Second World War, the state of Israel has been started, has been officially recognized, and the Jews want to build a new temple, the third temple in Jerusalem, to start again their normal practices as prescribed by the Old Testament. And to purify the area, to build the third temple, they have to purify the area with the blood of some cows. This is their ideal purification. So, this Zoroaster had pretty much the same idea. And we can see there is a very close connection. Now, okay, until now, is everything clear?
Is everything clear? Yes.
Any questions?
Any questions? Not as such,
Okay.
but yeah, it looks very like how it all happened
Yeah,
and
it's too
looks
much
interesting.
information.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, because these things, nobody talks about these things to Hindus. They have no idea about history.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, the academic system in India is not very good, and especially they're very confused about history.
And one
And
more thing, because the Indian
yeah,
history is mostly written by leftists, so they don't want to go into these religious things and all.
oh, definitely,
They
definitely.
bash Hinduism, but they will not bash Abrahamic religion or anything. So they don't
Yeah,
want
yes, yes.
that side of this.
Yeah, they are focusing mostly on this idea of India versus opposite the West. So
Mm.
they're focusing more about the colonial era, maybe a little
Yeah.
bit about the Islamic period, but
Mm.
not very clearly because they're still glorifying the Muslims,
Yeah.
like the Tipu Sultan, and lots of weird people that were actually not very good persons, but they're still considered great historical personalities. And mostly they're talking about the in, freedoms fight, the independence fight and everything. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that there is a lot to learn, to understand, you know, because if we want to understand the world, if we want to understand other religions, because
Mm.
other religions are very much interested in Hinduism, but not in a good way. You got the point. So, we need to know them and we need to know ourselves, and then we win. You heard about this the art of war. There is this famous Chinese general. You heard about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard about it, but I haven't read it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think that many Hindus in India have read it. And maybe they think they don't need it. But this guy Sun Tzu was a very clever general, and the age about the fifth century before the present current era. Sun Tzu was one of the best quotes, in my opinion, is that if you go to war and you know only yourself and you don't know the enemy, you will only have 50% of chances to win. So, in the same way, if you know the enemy and if you don't know yourself, also you have 50% chances to win. If you know the enemy and you know yourself, you have 100% chances of winning. And if you don't know the enemy and you don't know yourself, about yourself, you have zero chances of winning. More or less. You know, but this is mostly the proportion. So I think we need to help people to actually get some knowledge so they can better understand. Because most people I see that they're not really interested in getting the proper knowledge. So they're talking about Hindu Rashtra, but I don't think we need a Hindu Rashtra because most people don't even know what Hindu means.
Mm.
Look at Mohan Bhagat. He became famous for stating that Hindus are all those who live in India are Hindus. Okay, this is the RSS chief. He's supposed to be an authority of Hinduism. And you see how silly this definition is. Because according to this definition, all the mullahs and Catholic cardinals and evangelists who are of Indian race, Indian DNA, they are Hindus. And because they are in India, they are Hindus. On the other hand, Indian Hindus, even of Indian descent, who live in the United States, in UK, Mauritius, Singapore, whatever, Australia, wherever, they're not Hindus because they don't live in India. What to speak of people who are not of Indian descent and who practice, follow the Vedas and, study and practice. That they cannot be Hindus. That's the parameter that they are applying, for example, in the rules for visiting, for the public to visit public Hindu temples. So non-Hindus are not allowed, but the people, the security guards are only verifying if someone is of Indian race, brown, basically. So that is the famous, Leela of Jagannath, that once the Rajguru of Nepal went to the Jagannath Puri temple, and he was not allowed to enter because he didn't look Hindu enough. Now, if you know the history of the Jagannath temple, Puri, the Jagannath Puri temple has a very strong relationship with Nepal because Adi Shankar rebuilt the Jagannath temple with the help of the king of Nepal. So, still today, the king of Nepal is considered by the temple authorities as on the same level of the king of Puri. So he's the brother of the king of Puri, which means he's Adi Sevaka. And the Rajguru of the king of Nepal definitely is supposed to be a Hindu. So they didn't allow him in because he didn't look Hindu enough, because he looked like kind of Chinese or something. And that was a big scandal at that point. You know. Of course, the police person was fired, and the Shankaracharya Puri apologized. But this is a result of the confusion. You know, people don't even know what Hindu means. So, we want to have a Hindu Rashtra. What kind of Rashtra it will be? So uh, my consideration is that we don't need a Hindu Rashtra. We need a Vedic Rashtra, which is the kind of nation government specified, explained in the Vedic scriptures, that is a perfect system that worked very well and made India very wealthy, very powerful, and very happy uh, part of the world. Fabulous, because everybody wanted to go to India. Why they wanted to go to India? Because India was poor. Because Indian people are stupid, ignorant, and poor and everything. No, of course not. Of course not. So basically, this is the situation. If you think that it is a good idea to help give people in general some good information, background knowledge, or history, the two things that I'm
Mhm.
working on are the Shastra and the history. These are two like the railroad tracks. Shastra and history. The history helps us put the Shastra into context, and the Shastra help us seeing where history went wrong or went right, before the disaster. Okay, anything else? Not really, I think.
No.
We just digest. We
Yeah.
digest all the information. If you want,
Yes.
you can prepare some questions if you want to
So
say
these
something.
things you've written in your book also somewhere. This
Okay,
history. In which
I
book?
have
Right.
written some of these in my book, Gods or Aliens,
Okay.
because I saw that this is a big trend. There are lots of people who are, going around telling that the devas, and even Krishna and Ram, and all the personalities of God, the avatars and everything, were all aliens. ordinary beings, mortal beings, but aliens. So this who's that? This Amish Tripathi, came down to say that Shiva was an alien who came to Earth with a spaceship. What? Or an ordinary being that became famous, and because he was powerful, he was considered a god. Like, okay. And people don't know the difference between the Daityas and the Adityas. They think, they confuse, the they're asking very, very foolish questions about the family life of Vishnu. How many children Vishnu had with Lakshmi. And you know, it's like they are very, they're very limited, a very materialistic vision. So of course they don't understand much. So basically, in my book, Gods or Aliens, question mark, we speak about the history, religion, mythology, and the perspective on Hinduism and the perspective of Hinduism. So how people see Hinduism and how Hinduism sees itself. Dasyu Adaitya, God, the Devas, and the various non-divine powerful beings like the Danavas, Yakshas, Rakshasas, Nagas, all these types of things. Then the Kasaria, and the Ashkenazi Zarathustra Gnosticism. Then we have a lot of elaboration, several chapters, about the idea of the aliens, how this idea of aliens came into the general public culture. Then we speak about the technology in Vedic India, including the weapons and the vimanas, and the Vaimanika Shastra. So I think it's a interesting book because it contains a lot of information and references. So everybody can go and check. That's the type of books that I write. I write books containing mainly information that people can go and verify. Okay, I think we got our time is over.
Yeah.
If you please, we'll meet again and we can discuss still more on this area or other areas as you would like to propose. No problem. I'm very open. Okay, so
Sure, sure.
thank you so much. Jai Jagannath. Jai Radhe.
Yes, sir. Yeah.